Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif, an urban planner, and you're more than welcome to join my big journey of exploring the making of smarter and more livable cities. Please don't forget to follow Urbanistica on the different social media platforms, and also let's connect on LinkedIn. Big thanks to Urbanistica podcast partner AFRI. AFRI is an international engineering and design company providing sustainable solutions in the fields of energy, industry, and infrastructure. Are you ready for a new episode? Let's go for it. Today we have a new episode. We have episode from the placemaking community. It's a big pleasure for me to welcome you, Ethan, Khadidja, Ramon, to Urbanistica podcast. Hey, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. Very, very happy to be back here with you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Always grateful for your leadership of these important conversations.
Hello to everybody and to all the listeners. And thank you, Mustafa, for having me here today.
Yeah, and welcome, Khadidja. This is your first time, and Ethan, Ramon, we're happy to have you back. So let's give the listeners a quick highlight about you. So how would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners? We start with you, Khadidja.
It's always hard to summarize yourself in a couple of words, but I'll do my best. I'm Khadidja. I'm an architect from Italy. I just came back to Italy after a couple of years in Northern Ireland. And in my research and in my life, I've always been interested in public space and in how public space can really shape communities and sometimes maybe disrupt them. For this reason, I'm always looking forward to conversation around placemaking, and how we can shape place for everybody's good.
Yeah, and welcome. I will be more than happy to have you here and to talk with you more. Let's welcome our second guest, Ethan. How are you?
Thank you, Mustafa. Yeah, so I'm wonderful. I'm the executive director of PlacemakingX, which is a global network of placemaking advocates, practitioners, and learners. And our goal is to continue to build the movement, support collective action, advocacy, and education. And this project that we're going to talk about today is really the culmination of so many great leaders, and very much thanks to Ramon. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Ethan. Yeah, great pleasure to be with both of you and Mustafa. My name is Ramon. I'm starting to be a usual suspect in these gatherings, but I'm currently the director of Placemaking Europe, as many of you will probably know. And we are the NGO for placemaking in Europe, a network of over 60 leaders around Europe, like fostering placemaking in their communities, and at the same time working with cities and organizations to advocate for introducing placemaking in their process and in their ways of developing cities. And yeah, currently personally quite focused and obsessed on how can we scale up the principles and the approaches of placemaking to broader city strategies.
Yeah, welcome all three of you. And Ramon, let me start with you. Tell us about the background of this project.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I'd say that it's been a long process, a long way, no? So like Spain was one of these countries that went in a very, very heavy lockdown. So it was almost completely banned to go on the street. But I was lucky enough that because of my job at that time, I was still allowed to go on streets. And I was just remember during March, like walking my city completely empty, like seeing and it was very, very, very emotional, no, at that time, no? But we were seeing how the main element that makes cities what they are, which is public space, which is being together, was suddenly vanished, no, and wasn't there. And we realized, and it started to with a lot of initial conversation with different members of the community, like Ethan among them, that we were thinking, okay, cities without public space are not cities. And at the same time, this crazy thing, this pandemic, that we didn't know by then how long it was going to last, but we immediately saw the kind of responses that were totally top down, were nationally led, were basically based on enforcement, on policing, on these sort of things, like could be very, like could create a lot of damage, especially for underserved and undeserved community, like this history showed after that. And also we thought that it was a good moment for reflection. We were going to be enclosed in our places, and as many other crises, no, that was an opportunity to reflect. And already at that moment, we were initially like start to think, okay, like let's start to discuss, because we shouldn't miss this opportunity, or we should at least bring our ideas to the public debate, because it was important to talk about the importance of public space. And as well, already thinking that when we were like societies were start going to recover from this pandemic, from this crisis, to bring public space to the center of this debate. So that was the original reason to develop this initiative.
Yeah, and I love the reason, like, or the way how you thought about this crisis, like it's an opportunity for us to reflect and do something instead of just being at home. Ethan, how was, like, when Ramon reached out to you, how was your reaction? What do you think?
Oh, yeah, this was no brainer to a great idea, and yeah, the opportunity to bring together the reflections and the learning of the leaders in the network. Everyone had been looking for opportunities to make this a meaningful crisis. Everyone had been implementing projects on the ground that needed to be shared and scaled, and everyone was looking to set a new normal, a new set of patterns, a new culture coming out of this crisis, and wanted to set collective intentions. It also, was very timely in terms of sort of the evolution of the placemaking movement and a PlacemakingX. We had launched, in the 6 months before the pandemic, with a series of conferences, actually starting with Valencia, that Ramon's Placemaking Europe there, and going around the world. We had conferences in Latin America and US and Australia and Asia, and culminating actually in the World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi, right before everything sort of locked down in February, 2000. And so obviously it wasn't what we expected, but then it became, we needed to figure out how to go digital and to not be traveling all around the world and gathering everybody in person. We were lucky to have the in-person relationships, but then we're able to build on those and connect people more efficiently and productively in many ways, through virtual gatherings. And I think this declaration, this charter, is a culmination of the collective wisdom and the collaboration, and relationships that have been built through these placemaking networks.
Yeah. And when did you start, like, doing the actual project? Like, was it directly after when the pandemic hit, or after a few months?
Yeah, let me answer that. So we immediately, as Placemaking Europe, we thought like the reasoning was there. So we said, let's launch the AfterCovid.City initiative to start to reflect on that. So we first started to monitor what was happening, how cities were reacting, how they were trying to guarantee the access to public space. So we were covering those stories. Immediately after that, we did an agreement with the city of Barcelona to also like start to reflect on which were going to be the next steps. So we organized the conference on the AfterCovid-City Superilla Barcelona, bringing some reflections already physically in Barcelona in October last year, but broadcasted it to the world. And immediately after that, what we did as well, we launched a survey. So the community of placemakers around the world was just giving us very detailed information about how the cities were reacting to that, the kind of policies, the kind of initiative around public space. And then we took all that information, and in December, so the last year of 2021, we gathered more than 80 urbanists and placemakers of around the world using a co-creative methodology to say, okay, we learned that much, we did so much, because most of the participants were actually deeply involved in their communities with this policies, no? For instance, I meant like Robin Abad in San Francisco, no, leading like the response of San Francisco to the crisis, as just giving one example. So 80 of us gathered in two co-creative workshops to say, okay, we learned so much. Now, what do we have to do together, and which are kind of the global common elements, because obviously like important of placemaking is acknowledging the local and the indigenous wisdom and the local characteristic of cities and places, but still bringing this global knowledge together and committing to some commitments. So that's how did it work.
Yeah, exactly. So Ethan, tell us more like about the contributors from which countries and so on.
So yeah, we were grateful for Placemaking Europe taking the initiative on this, and looking forward to hearing from Khadidja and how she really masterfully ran this process, and it really a process. We've always talked about the most important part of placemaking is the process, not the product, and I think again this product reflects that same value. There was an extraordinary process run by the Placemaking Europe leaders, and but we were grateful to be able to draw on the other networks. There's about 18 regional networks and about 9 more in formation, covering much of the planet right now. Learning a lot from Placemaking Europe, but every network has their strengths and challenges. And there's people that participated from Nepal and from all over Latin America and Africa and Australia and New Zealand, and so we're we're lucky to gain from that wisdom, and each of them represent networks with collective wisdom and learning and challenges built up over many years as well. So that's what PlacemakingX is built to contribute to these types of conversations, and I feel like the network, the leaders really came alive, and really we're thrilled to be part of it.
Yeah, and I hear a lot of the talent pool. Now what I see like a placemakers pool. so Khadidja, tell us, because what I see now, I have a document of 19 pages, amazing, with a great knowledge. Tell me behind the scenes, like tell us about the co-creation process.
So my role was in particular moderating the online session, and I guess the first thing to talk about, as Ethan was touching on, is really the power of online tools. And I think before the global pandemic, we will never thought that we could have so much wisdom and so much knowledge and people from really around the world being there and sharing ideas in the same place. And I think this is one of the great things about the whole process of writing the charter. So the online sessions were developed around 4 phases, but I think what's really powerful of the outcome of this 2 hour session was that we were starting from our experience, personal experience of this last year and a half. And from this, we're trying to find commonalities and common themes and common interest. And we really developed at the end of these 2 hours a commitment. So, as Ramon was saying, it's not just about sharing experience, but also about understanding what are the practical tools and the practical thing that we can go to the city with and say, this is what we've learned, and this is how we can develop and what we can practically do. Just want to finish by saying that it has been really great to be part of this process. And every time I see an email from Placemaking Europe, and as a placemaking leader, I'm always looking forward to get involved. And this time was great as the other time. So I'm always looking forward in being more involved and just listening and speaking to brilliant minds. So please reach out if you need any other support.
How was the atmosphere within the community during the workshop? Were people like angry because of COVID or
Talking about the atmosphere, I think it's always interesting the way talking about the last years evolves. So we really start usually from really a grim atmosphere. So people will at first remember how it was really hard to be home alone, not being able to go out. But then whenever we shift about speaking of public spaces, what happens that everybody really realized on how we've seen our cities in a different way, and especially we've seen how really going from our private house and our private homes to the public space, it's there in the public space that we found our communities, that we really shaped our communities. And I think a lot of people, and even myself, I've discovered spaces and places in my city that I've never seen before COVID and before the pandemic. So yeah, it's I think it's a great way to speak about the last year. Not speaking about the isolation that we had in our houses, but about how being in the public space open more possibility of connecting with others.
Yeah, amazing. And also, thank you so much. You did a really good job. Thank you so much again, Khadija.
Mustafa, we should ask you as well. You were part of the discussion on the workshop. So I think for a difference, we should interview you a bit this time. So how did you find it and how was your experience?
I share the same feeling with Khadija when I also part of one of the leaders in Europe. And when I get an email from the Placemaking Europe or PlacemakingX, do you want to be part of this? You cannot say no to this because this is like a big chance to change the world. And I say I sign in directly. And then we had the workshops. The big feeling or the big joy for me was to meet the other leaders and hear from them how they experience. We almost experience the same, but when it comes to different cultures and countries, then there are some details that I was like more than happy to listen and to learn from. Khadija did a good job, and also you and Ethan. The introduction was clear, so I just enjoy the hours of workshops. I was a bit sad that only 2 workshops. I wanted more, just for fun to meet also the others. But I think like it was like really one of the great workshops I had during the COVID. Really well planned, moderated, and also when I look at the PDF now, I'm happy to be part of this. Like it's really making history or making future. So I want to say thank you for making this happen.
It was very important that was a combination of bringing like lived knowledge, so like subjective knowledge of the people that were experiencing their cities, but at the same time, like most of them were also involved in policies. And actually, like the combination of those two was very nice. And also the opportunity to have people from more than 30 different countries, different ages and experience, no? Because there were like people that have been like less years working in this field, but we also had like some of the big names, no, and like Charles Landry, Thomas Mark Cora, for instance, no, or yeah, people with very, very senior positions as well. But that was very nice, and it was very generous as well, how people were sharing, without trying to balance the hierarchies, like very horizontal, I think, in a good way. And that also, like, I guess that sum up to create the quality of the result.
Yeah, exactly. And would you love, Ramon, to share with us the result, like the findings? You can give us a highlight, and then I will put the link of the PDF so people can read it.
Absolutely. I think the most important thing is like COVID still considered by like the major crisis that cities have experienced in the lifetime of the urbanists that were working with us. That funny enough, people was rediscovering and re-enjoying public space, like the importance of public space to combat loneliness, mental health, etc., and the link with equality. Now, let's say those are the main findings about the research, and then the commitments are just shared to try to bring like a common like roadmap for cities into recovery. Now that we discuss about like investment infrastructure and other sort of policies, we say, okay, but public space is important because it interacts with innovation, with social aspects, with bureaucracy, with culture, with climate action, and with connection and mobility. And in this benchmark, we just define 18 very specific commitments for cities that are going from like the place to revive discussed and underused infrastructure, to, as another example, return to and recognize indigenous and endogenous knowledge, or the importance of public space to reduce loneliness. I will give those examples.
And Ethan, Ramon mentioned to us the findings. What is the next step? What is the idea? Is it for cities, for placemakers, for consultants? What are we going to do with the findings?
So one, I think these are inspiring, provocative, powerful statements, and to have them all together, these sort of potentially perceived as disparate ideas all put together into one powerful document, can offer something foundational for us all to work together going forward. But I'd also like to emphasize, I think one of the most powerful things about this is, again, the process, the model, that process that that Placemaking Europe really led to put this together is a process that reflects the best of the placemaking community. The placemaking community skill is really often most shines around leading these kinds of processes. So I think the charter can be very useful and provocative for communities, but even more valuable, the process to develop it might be something that cities, regions want to replicate, learn from, to develop their own intentions, to sort of to riff on these ideas, to get buy-in and participation from their communities in shaping their charters that they can own even more. And then, of course, this is all about action. We just actually had our global PlacemakingX leaders call yesterday, 2 of them for different time zones, and had over 100 of the leaders, all representing the different networks participating, and we're all talking about how do we come out of COVID. We're all planning to action. We've built these intentions, these relationships, these organizations in many cases, and we're ready to scale the placemaking movement from sort of the short-term actions that have really turned upside down the shaping of cities and gotten attention, these lighter, quicker, cheaper projects, to moving towards what we call place-led development, to attracting investment, interest, people to contribute to the public realm on the terms of local people, for and by local people, really shaping a future to bring together many different causes, disciplines, sectors, for the cause of place, for broader collaboration and more systemic change. But one of the announcements that will come from soon, but we can discuss, was that we're going to do a global placemaking action week right around when Placemaking Europe's conference will be in Pontevedra. So for people that can't come there and people that will be there, we'll have a global call to action for placemakers and others all around the world to really implement these ideas and talk and share how we can all have a great collective impact together. But yeah, we have this week with the high-level meetings of the UN are here talking about how do we implement the Nuremberg Agenda, how are we doing with implementation. So the timing is really terrific for this charter. Tomorrow we'll go on a bike ride with some of the leaders of UN Habitat and others, and we'll get to discuss this with them, and then we'll be at the World Urban Forum in Europe. I'll be in a lot of conferences in Europe over the next couple of months, and hope to, including Helsingborg, with the Placemaking Europe's organizing it, the H2 Summit, and with a lot of the Swedish colleagues of yours, Mustafa, and we'll be in Paris for the International Making Cities Livable Conference, and actually I'll be at the World Economic Forum, talking about regenerative placemaking and how do we scale placemaking, in regenerative ways. And lastly, actually, Ramon and I will be at the Global Cultural Districts Network Conference in Lugano at the end of May. So yeah, a lot of opportunities to further this conversation. Yeah.
There's so much happening, and I'm looking forward to meet you here when you come to Europe, and you're more than welcome. And Ramon, tell us also about what is the next step? How can we use this document? What can we do with it? And who is the target group for this document?
Yeah, for the first target group is the community in itself. So I think, as Ethan probably shared, the process has a lot of value in itself. So it was an outcome to say, okay, let's agree in a product, and that was quite important. Second element is for us as Placemaking Europe, we do partner with a lot of cities and organizations. So we are using it as the sort of backbones on those partnerships for the following couple of years. So we will say, okay, if there is a city that want to work with us, those are the commitments that they have to share. And also I think it's relevant as well, because sometimes that those sort of concepts can be used as well to greenwash or whitewash other approaches or whatever. So we say, okay, like if a city or organization is committed with public space and placemaking, I think this is an extremely powerful starting point. And the third element would be also for any individual to use it to convince their municipalities to translate it to the languages, to share it in their communities. And last but not least, as also Ethan said, we could use those methodologies to bring up local charters or local developments.
Yeah, so it's like we can use both the process and the product.
Exactly. But as everything that we do is completely open source, so whoever can translate it to the language, like redesign it, use it however they want, and just spread the word.
I love it. This is what I love with placemaking. Like everything is open, so we can just altogether change the world. And before we let the listeners click on the file and start reading it, I would love that each one of you give 2 takeaway messages to our listeners. We can start with you, Khadidja.
I think that the first takeaway is really in the process. As Ethan and Ramon already pointed out, this experience is not only the outcome, but it's really about the process itself. And I think what we've learned, what I've learned, is really going across sectors, cross culture, cross ages, cross really everything, really brings rich conversation and new perspective that you've never thought about. And this can really just give new ideas and new fuel to old ideas if you want. And I think the second takeaway is really how public space is. I mean, we are public space, and a lot of time we talk about economy, finance, and we forget that behind those numbers there is people. So I think that something I really believe in, and that is coming also from the charter, is the fact that by developing and by designing and co-designing public space, you can really make everything else thrive. And I really, really appreciate having been part of this, and I believe that this is just the beginning.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you, Khadidja. And Ethan?
Well, obviously there's so many takeaways as public space connects and disrupts so many silos and touches on so many parts of people's lives. I think the first takeaway is how we were disconnected from public space and from each other for a little bit, and now how we reconnect with it and with intention, and realize the power for it to bring us together in new ways, to shape new patterns, to address equity issues and health issues and sustainability issues in a very fundamental way is key. So this using public space and placemaking as a tool for bringing us together again and creating new patterns. And then I guess on a bigger scale too, even than that, it's how place and public space can be a cause that globally that connects and disrupts global causes. How we need the solutions are often there, that people understand a lot of the biggest challenges we have. Place reconnecting to place and how place connects people is the only means we're going to have to building our capacity to address a lot of these bigger challenges. So coming together of these types of ideas, of these types of people that bridge and connect many worlds is the only way we're going to build our collective capacity globally to take on our bigger challenges and continue human life and thriving human communities on this planet.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Ethan. And Ramon.
Important takeaway was confirming the centrality of place. And I'd say that every city should have a placemaking strategy, because if they want to address the main current challenges, and most of them that have been worse by the pandemic and the crisis, like loneliness, mental health, urban health, equity, those sort of things. Like using placemaking or putting placemaking at the center of their development strategies is key. It's effective. It is inclusive. And yeah, they should start doing that as soon as possible. And we are here to help.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the good job. And thank you so much for giving your time to record this episode. And hopefully see you during the H22 here in Helsingborg.
Thank you for your leadership.
Yes, see you there for sure. And thank you so much for doing that, Mr. Fayon.
Well, thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. You learned something new and also got inspired by the guest. Don't forget to share the episode on your social media and recommend it to people you think they are really interested in this topic. Thank you so much again for giving your valuable time to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif. Keep up the good work. Keep loving cities.